Okay, we're back. We're live. We're ThinkTech Talks here on a given Friday. It's 12 noon in Honolulu, but we are talking to Gauri Khandekar in Brussels, and I think it's 12 midnight in Brussels. Am I right?
Yes, it's midnight in Europe.
So that's why we're calling this Midnight in Europe. It's the perfect name, and it has no reference to Woody Allen or Midnight in Paris. Although I suppose when you take your next trip to Paris, we can do Midnight in Paris too.
Sure.
So let me introduce you a little, Gauri. Gauri spent some time with Pacific Forum here, a year ago, a year and a half ago, seems like. And then she returned to her regular situation, which is a think tank research analyst in Brussels for an organization called Fride, F-R-I-D-E, which is a Spanish think tank headquartered in Madrid. And Gauri runs the Asia program, the Asia program office in Brussels. And she joins us by Skype today from Brussels at midnight in Brussels. And we have talked to her, before from Brussels. We have talked to her from Delhi, where she traveled around the time of the Indian elections. And did we talk to you from Singapore also? I don't remember.
No, I just returned and I just came back this morning from India as well, so
Okay.
I'm pretty close to India.
Well, it's wonderful to have you on the show, Gauri. We'd like to talk to you all the time, find out everything that's going on.
It's my pleasure.
So I'd like to cover three things in our time together today, or tonight, as the case may be. And they would be John Kerry's recent trip, to India, and what brought that about, and what happened there with the Prime Minister, and then I'd like to talk about how Modi is doing. I'd like to talk about what I heard on National Public Radio just a minute ago, that Modi is not delivering public statements in English. Just in, let's see, what is the language he uses? Hindi.
Yes.
And this cuts out an awful lot of people who just don't happen to speak Hindi in India. And the third thing I'd like to talk about is the BRICS program that you're working on. It's a conference, I take it, and BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And this was held in Brazil, in Fortaleza, Brazil, in the middle of July. So I'd like to talk about your research on that and how that might affect, not only the members of the BRICS organization, the BRICS group, but how it might affect Europe and for that matter, the U.S. So let's start with John Kerry. He's been very active lately. I'm not sure you could say he's been very successful, but he's been very active. So tell us about the trip he made to India.
So, well, he's been traveling to India, and he did meet Prime Minister Modi and our Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj. Well, the recent visit, he was there basically to boost defense and business ties. But the meeting is overshadowed by spying accusations against the U.S. The thing is that the NSA, which is the National Security
Agency,
yes, was snooping, according to the Snowden leaks, on the Bharatiya Janata Party, which is the current political party in power and is also Narendra Modi's own party. And these allegations of snooping have not gone down very well in India. This comes amidst rumors that the only 5 political parties that were under surveillance by the US were included parties like Hamas or the Muslim Brotherhood. So I mean, for the BJP to be put together in this motley crew was not seen as very nice.
BJP is a big, legitimate political party in India, and it was played a prominent role in the elections recently. It's been around for a while. It's got some great prestige among the electorate. So to lump them up with Hamas, that just doesn't sound right at all.
Exactly. And the BJP is a mainstream political party. I mean, there is a certain nationalistic element to them, but they are not all out as a militant organization. They're a very mainstream political party. They're in power now. They're governing the country, and they have a good track record of governance. You see, under the BJP, India had progressed quite a lot as well, and it is thanks to their policies that India went on to achieve 10% growth. So I do think it undermined the political party to a certain extent. Now, Kerry was also there to push forward agreement on the big WTO deal, which would see tariffs come down across the board all over the world. And India has been on the one side opposing some of the openings or trade liberalizations. Basically, India leads a group of developing countries called the G77, and it helps to voice their concerns, those as well shared by both India and China, saying that the West does not really understand the poor, lonely farmers' cause, basically, and that they need to be more accommodating to low economic strata in developing countries. So this has been one area which Senator Kerry wanted to, Secretary of State Kerry wanted to push forward.
So it sounds like he was mending fences. It sounds like in part he was trying to repair the damage that had been created by the revelation about the National Security Agency. Did he succeed in that?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, it was mixed feelings. You see, U.S.-India relations are going through quite a rough patch with the incident that happened with the Indian diplomat Khobragare, who was there was a big hassle there because she was stripped and cavity searched by U.S. forces relating U.S. Police relating to her issues with her maid, basically. But she was the #2 at the Indian embassy in New York, and this was not really seen as very nice in India, and the US image got damaged as well, and nothing was done about it either. I think she's still not allowed to travel to the US. If she does, she would be arrested. So that was another issue. Now there has been the second issue about the snooping allegations that have come about. So US-India relations are going through quite a bit of a rough patch now. One more thing, and I just had a report recently, is that he was on the phone all the time, excusing himself while he was in a meeting with India's foreign minister, which is a lady, Sushma Swaraj. So I don't think that was I think that was a diplomatic faux pas. But little issues like this need to be ironed out. I think what India wants is to be taken more seriously and treated with the same respect that it itself treats other countries. And this is how we also come about to the whole BRICS grouping, you know. They're just a bunch of countries that want a better say in international relations, a more of an equal status. And they want to make the point that times have changed. There's no longer a donor-recipient relationship. We're all on an equal footing now. I think it's just adjustments to global changes.
Well, that's an interesting development, a rough patch in U.S.-Indian relations, because U.S.-Indian relations have really been very good over the post-war years, and one would assume that that benefits both countries. But I wonder, and this may be a sort of a fundamental question, but why is it good for us to have good relations with India and vice versa, and why is it not good, and how does it translate out for us to have a rough patch in those relations? How does it affect things in general?
Yeah. Well, for one, how can you afford to not have good relations with India? It's an emerging country. It's an economic powerhouse at the moment. It is the world's second most populous country, sorry, and you have Indians everywhere. I mean, economies are so interlinked. I recently came across figures saying that almost half of Silicon Valley is Indian. So you have very strong economic interlinkages. Beyond that, India shares US's values of democratic freedoms, um, uh, representation, human rights, equality. I think this is something important to bear in mind, especially given India's own neighborhood. It's surrounded by one of the most uh, volatile neighborhood in the whole world, and there was a major war in which the US was involved in India's backyard. So that was Afghanistan. Um, India also has rough relations with Pakistan that is seen as promoting terrorism, and the same terrorism affects the US. I think India is an ally. It's a natural ally for
Yes.
the US.
Yes.
But there is, I think there are certain nuances which are not being ironed out. It's more of a cultural difference, if I can say so,
Yes.
I do think that the business community needs to lead relations with India, because when you connect business to business, it really generates much more of a win-win situation than little political differences. I do think that the US got it a bit wrong before with India, because as you know, during the Cold War, India refused to take sides, either with the West or with Russia. So it pursued its middle path, which came to be known as the non-aligned movement. And the US took this wrong. On the other hand, Pakistan joined the US and was very much on Western lines. So I think that still lingers to a certain extent today. But I think in today's world, where you have emerging powers like India, like China, I think India is more of a close partner, more of a natural partner to the US than China, for instance.
Yes. That's Gauri Khandekar. She joins us by Skype from Brussels. She's with Fride. She heads the Asian program in Fride, which is a think tank in Europe, headquartered in Spain, and she's in their Brussels office. This is ThinkTech Talks. We're talking about midnight in Europe with Gauri Khandekar. We'll be right back after this short break.
My name is Alice Lee Hagan. I host the ThinkTech Hawaii BizEd Spotlight. We talk about fascinating people and interesting issues that affect our island state here in Hawaii. We broadcast every Thursday from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 4 and on Olelo 54. Make sure you tune in and we'll see you soon. Aloha.
Aloha. My name is David Day. I host ThinkTech Asia, and we talk about international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and we broadcast live every Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock and on Olelo 54. Make sure you tune in, and we'll see you there.
Hi, my name is Seymour Kazimirski. Welcome to Seymour's World. We're here to open minds and facilitate conversations. Our topics range from human interest stories to political stories to around the world stories. I hope you enjoy our show. It's on ThinkTech Hawaii. Thank you.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here on a Friday noon time in Hawaii, but it's Friday midnight in Europe. So we call our ThinkTech show today Midnight in Europe, and we are talking with Gauri Khandekar in Brussels. She's part of Fride. She's the head of the Asia program in Fride, which is a think tank headquartered out of Spain, but she's in the Brussels office. And she joins us from time to time. We always enjoy it very much to talk about what's happening there and what's happening in her connection with Asia. So, Gauri, let's talk about you for a minute. Let me make you the President of the United States for a moment.
Oh.
What would you? How do you feel different? You feel different?
I feel much more important.
What would you do, to make it right, to normalize, if you will, to get out of the rough patch of relations that have taken place recently between the United States and India?
Tough question. Like I said before, I think business-to-business ties should be included, should be more the driving force of bilateral relations. So I think in that sense, I would possibly include India in the TPP negotiations, that is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's a major free trade deal that the US is engaged in the Asia Pacific, and it has around 13 partners, 14 most probably if Japan joins in, and South Korea. So I think getting India in would be very much a symbolic gesture, and as you know, we do prefer, we do like symbolic gestures in India quite a lot. Like the waiver, the NSG waiver, the nuclear suppliers group waiver. So,
Yeah, yeah.
well, that was a bit more than symbolic, but yeah, I think including India in the TPP would be quite a good sign.
Let me turn the question around for a moment now and make you Premier Modi. What would you do in order to establish the best possible relations right now with the U.S. going forward? What would you do? What steps would you take?
I feel like I'm in the twilight zone. Well, I think there's a certain degree of pessimism in the Indian state as well. Pessimism for relations with the U.S., but also a bit of mistrust, skepticism, if you like. So I do think that understanding the US more of what is going on in the US worldview, in the US psyche would help a bit more, you know. So I do think I could personally, if I was Modi, I would travel a bit more to the US. There's a big a visit coming up, I think in September itself, when Prime Minister Modi will travel to the US and meet President Obama. So I think a few more visits like that should help bring both leaders much closer. And I would definitely invite President Obama to India.
Yes, oh yes. Will you be able to go on that trip? Will you be able to join him or have a, a reporter assignment, so to speak, to go to Washington?
I would love that. I should work on that now. That's a great idea.
Okay, tell him I said so.
Will do.
Anyway, so let's talk about Modi. It's only it's like 60 days ago or less that he was elected. And it was a sweeping election, an important election, a new chapter election for India. And he's certainly a new chapter kind of, official. And he had great promise in the business area and in bringing India together as a 21st century nation. So how's he doing?
Modi's doing quite well, if I can say so. Now, he had also mentioned himself that, what India was suffering until now was, years of misgovernance, of bad policy or bad implementation of policies. So I do think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done before much results can be really seen. So I think work is going on in the background. I just read today that our Lok Sabha, which is the lower house of parliament, is 103% more productive. So that's a good sign.
That's a good thing. We could learn by that.
He's cracking the whip, and that has been quite evident in many reports, which say that the working processes in the ministries have changed. He expects people to come up with solutions rather than just citing the problematic and to deliver. Now, he has been visibly more effective on foreign policy. One of his achievements has been in consolidating India's sub-region, which is South Asia. And in it, he has really made an effort to add much more political momentum to SAARC, which is the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. It's a regional organization. And here, India and Pakistan both play the leadership. Economic integration in SAARC would really benefit the whole region, because it would help bring peace and really put forward economic benefits rather than mistrust. So at the time of his swearing-in ceremony, he invited all the leaders of SAARC countries to come over to India and attend his ceremony, which is unprecedented. And he as well has traveled. His first foreign destination has been to Bhutan, which is a tiny neighboring country to India's north. And now he will also travel to Nepal. And Prime Minister Singh, Manmohan Singh, who's Prime Minister Modi's predecessor, had not traveled to Nepal in 10 years of his tenure. So I think that's important. The other issue has been the BRICS Summit, where India made much impact through, well, the whole BRICS Development Bank and the contingency reserve arrangement, which we'll talk about later, but that has been quite an achievement as well. And I don't know if many people know it, but India has huge diaspora in the Middle East, and the recent crisis in Iraq has jeopardized some of them. Sushma Swaraj, India's foreign minister, has played quite an effective role in helping secure the release of Indian nurses abroad and most of the Indian diaspora that wish to come back, because some of them were also held captive by ISIS militants. So, so these have been quite significant, visible achievements, mostly on the foreign front.
Well, you wrote an article not too long ago, as I have it, and actually I have a download link, which is a long link, but it's Modi and the EU is the operative term, and you talked about his the election and his winning and the new strength of the BJP party,
Yes.
and how things are changing from what you called a bulky coalition government to a better model under the current BJP leadership. So I wonder if you could tell us about the article, what prompted you to write the article, and what it means, in terms of the diplomatic and business ties between the countries in the EU and India. It sounds very affirmative. No?
Yeah. Well, you see, I specialize on EU-India relations, and I write quite frequently about it. One of the things that is going on in the EU-India relationship is free trade agreement, which is still under negotiation even after 7 years, and that's seen as major. It would link the markets of 28 European countries to that of India, so it is a major strategic move on the part of the EU and India. But this agreement is really stuck in limbo for so many years, and even I feel so pessimistic about it, not least because of very technical issues regarding wines and spirits, or procurement policies, or labor standards, or even service mobility. But I do think that it lacks a bit of a political will, the political push that's necessary to push it. Now, very interestingly, a few years back, I think I mentioned this before, Narendra Modi was boycotted by most of the EU member states for the pogrom in Gujarat, which was interreligious strife. There were riots in Gujarat, and more than 1,000 people, mainly Muslims, were killed. Narendra Modi was the chief minister of that state, which is like a governor of a state in the US. So he was basically implicated for non-action, but the Supreme Court cleared him of any charges. But nobody at that time in Europe expected Narendra Modi to become India's prime minister. And now, a couple of years back, they started reaching out to him when they got news that, well, he's running for the top posts in India. And now that he's elected, I think it's a bit of an embarrassing situation. The man that you had basically had a visa travel ban against is now the top guy in the world's largest democracy. So I think that is a hurdle, and I don't think that Narendra Modi has forgotten that to that extent as well. Now, this FTA is stuck for another reason, which is because the BJP had championed national opposition to it, citing inequality, farmers' rights, and the BJP has never done that before for any free trade agreement. So now in power, I think the BJP, even if it did want to push through the deal, it would come across as hypocritical. So I don't think they want that to happen, especially within just 3 months in power. So I think the EU-India relations are stuck for the moment. And there's been no mention of Europe of recent, of the EU at least.
Well, you know, we talk about the relations, you know, between India and the U.S. and you know, the benefit of being trading partners, and you know, it just seems to me there's huge prospect for India as a trading partner with some or all of the EU, and there's a way to go on that. I mean, there's possibilities that have not yet been realized there, and through, you know, better business connections, better diplomatic ties, and sort of putting the past behind us, this could be the dawning of a new economic era for India, and for that matter for the EU, a great connection, changing the world, don't you think?
Yes, I agree. And one of the points that I'd push forward in my recent papers is that the EU and probably the US as well should strike up a partnership on urbanization with India. Now, urbanization means construction, development, city planning, green energies, and there's so much business. India is just growing, it's expanding, cities are expanding. You have cheap labor, but you have also qualified labor, English-speaking labor. So I think that could be a real win-win if you enter into an urbanization partnership with India.
Yeah, and you're there. You're right there in Brussels. You connect with all of India. My guess is that if you haven't met Modi yet, you will soon. That's we can talk about that after the break. Gauri Khandekar, a researcher and head of the Asia program at Fride, a think tank in Europe, headquartered in Spain, and her office is in Madrid. And headquartered in Madrid. Her office is in Brussels, and she joins us there from Brussels on Skype now. We're calling this Midnight in Europe. We're going to take a short break and be right back. Don't fall asleep now, Gauri.
Aloha, this is Keli'i Akina. It's my privilege to be the host of Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. Ehana Kako, what does that mean? Well, many people have heard of Epule Kako, let's pray together. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Let's work together to build a better economy, government, and society. And every week, Monday from 2 to 3 o'clock, you will see movers and shakers and other people who are working together to build a better economy, government, and society. Again, I'm Keli'i Akina on the Ehana Kako weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. Aloha. See you here Mondays 2 to 3.
Aloha, my name is Willow Chang Elion, and I host a show called The Art of Life. We air live every Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. And what we do is basically we focus on individuals who create a unique sense of place for Hawaii. These are movers and shakers, artists, innovators. They are also traditionalists. They're all involved in the archival process, and they make this place a unique place, one that makes Hawaii a richer place to be. I hope you do join us, and certainly tell your friends about the show, whether they live here or they live abroad. It's a way to give back to our community. We're keeping it pulling.
I just flew back.
Okay, here we are. We're back. We're live. We are in an excited phase of Midnight in Europe with Gauri Khandekar, who joins us by Skype from her home and place of think tank business in Brussels. We always like to talk to her wherever she is. She's a research investigator with Fride, Fride, which is a Spanish think tank which has offices in other cities, including Brussels. And today we call the show Midnight in Europe, and we're talking about a number of issues that she's been working on and that affect relations between India and Europe and the U.S. So I'm so happy to be able to talk to you, Gauri. Thank you so much for staying up late for us.
It's my pleasure, really. It's given new meanings to my midnights.
So let's turn to BRICS. You know, I don't think people know enough about BRICS. Why don't you first, why don't you tell us what BRICS is, how it got organized, and how and this recent summit, you know, and what the summit means. Okay.
Sure. So BRICS is the acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It was mainly a term coined by Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill in the early 2000s, which was basically a marketing stunt where he grouped together this odd bunch of emerging countries and Russia. Well, South Africa wasn't in the original grouping, and it was mainly done to promote investors towards these countries. It was a marketing gimmick. But then these countries took it up seriously, and they found ways to come together. Now, the BRICS as a grouping have much more differences than what binds them together. Of course, they are emerging economies, Brazil, India, and China in particular, and South Africa to a certain extent, if you put it against the continental background, and Russia, which is a bit in the same category, but not quite. But they do have certain differences when it comes to global affairs. For example, on climate change, Brazil stands out quite apart from the rest. And other issues like this, India and China have a historically really bad relationship since the early 60s. And they do have tensions along the border, there are border incursions. They don't see eye to eye on a large number of issues. But still, their ability to come together is basically with a view to the changing global order, where they see they have more benefits in sticking together as a group to make more changes in what they feel is an unfair system, where they are not represented enough or enough as compared to their economic stature of current or their population standards or their own will to make changes across the globe. And they still see it as a Western-dominated world order, which they are fighting, struggling to generate more space in between.
How would you
this is how they came across.
How would you compare them to NATO?
Oh, NATO is a military alliance. Basically, the US, well, North America and North Europe US and Europe have this alliance whereby there's an Article 5 which states that they would, an attack on one is an attack on all. So mainly it's a military alliance. This has nothing to do with military. On the contrary, as I mentioned, India and China would find themselves on opposing ends. They're probably each other's biggest threats. At least China is for India. So I don't think militarily it has anything to do with the alliance.
How would you compare them to the EU?
Again, the EU is more of an economic bloc. They have regional integration policies. So you have a free, you have a common market where you have free movement of people, goods, services. But this is not the same with the BRICS countries either. The only thing that binds them, like I mentioned, is the status as rising economies, more of the South, the global South, and the non-Western countries. So that's what brought them together, I think.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, I mean, I'm not really familiar with the inner workings, but, we have a deteriorating relationship with Russia. Russia's just trying to be the bad boy of Europe, I think. And I wonder whether Russia would use the BRICS summit as a way to, get leverage, get political advantage or diplomatic advantage against the U.S. Is there any sign of that?
Yes, for sure. Well, Russia was recently kicked out of the G7 grouping, G8 grouping, which now became the G7. it was quite a prestigious grouping with the US, certain European allies, and Russia coming together. And after the Ukraine crisis, Russia was kicked out, of course. Now, instead of Russia appearing to have sulked away and then, eventually heeded to Western, what the West was saying, especially on Ukraine, Russia shows now that it has other friends, other clubs where it hangs out. And it's quite an important club right now, at the moment at least. So Russia is trying to invest all its diplomatic energies into this grouping, which it feels gives it more of a prestigious place in international affairs and not only as the bad boy of Europe. So I think Russia is definitely using the BRICS for sure.
Where does the U.S. stand on this, Gauri? The U.S. is not included. They don't have anything to say. They can only be a bystander. They can watch, the progress, if you will, of the BRICS group. How does the U.S. deal with BRICS? Is the U.S. Friendly, encouraging, or something else when it comes to the U.S. relationship with BRICS as a group?
Sure. Now, you see, the BRICS grouping has emerged as somewhat of an alliance against the West. And by the West, I mean the US and Europe, if not Canada is not included at least. So in that sense, as a group opposing the US, I don't think the US does encourage the BRICS grouping or its alliance as much. Now, until recently, everybody was quite skeptical of the grouping and its ability to make any changes at the multilateral level. So they really doubted how much of a difference the BRICS could make. But I do think now that the BRICS are coming of age, especially with the new bank that they've created, and this directly challenges in its own way, in its own little way, US hegemony, because as you know, the Bretton Woods system was a Western initiated system whereby you had the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Now, the World Bank head is always someone from the US, and the IMF head is always a European. And this is something that these BRICS countries are against. They also want to be represented even at the highest level. They also want greater voting shares because their contributions have gone higher. Let me just give you an example. China has less votes than the Benelux countries, which is Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, which is so surprising. And all of the BRICS countries have less than 11% of the total share in at the World Bank. So I do think that there is somewhat of a misrepresentation at the moment. And in order for the US to really preserve these institutions and not allow other institutions like these new BRICS banks to come about or other alternative forums to come about, I do think that they should engage more with the BRICS, try to accommodate their rise, their growth, so that its own institutions are preserved.
Well, and it raises an interesting question in my mind. We talk about India's new possibilities, new power, new economic power, and for that matter, diplomatic power, new possibilities in many ways. And, we know that U.S. and Russia aren't getting along very well. We know that from an economic point of view, manufacturing is going largely offshore to China and so forth. So talk about the rise of these new banking relationships among the BRICS countries. Do you think the long-term notion of the American dollar as the reserve currency is in jeopardy because of all these sea changes that have been happening?
Yes, I do think so. Not in the very near future, but eventually, yes. I think with this contingency reserve arrangement that the bank has created, basically it's an arrangement whereby it would buffer shocks. Now, let me give you a concrete example. In 2013, when the U.S. Recalled stimulus, the Congress recalled stimulus, there was a flight of capital out of India. And at that time, the Indian rupee plummeted against the dollar. So this was something of a very worrying situation for India. Now, in a similar situation, the bank, the CRA, which is the contingency reserve arrangement, would buy the affected currency, which means that it would balance the effects. And so it would not only maintain the stability of the currency in question, which would be the yuan or the rupee or the ruble, but it would also promote or let these currencies emerge as options for settlement of global trades. Now, you know, global South-South trade is more than global North-South trade already. So the more and more the yuan, for instance, I think more certainly the yuan would emerge as a more trending currency, and the CRA will certainly help it.
Interesting. Well, let me say that both of the articles that I've been referring to, the one is the BRICS Summit just now, coming of age. Indeed, it sounds like BRICS is coming of age, and it's a force to be reckoned with going forward. That's at Fride, fride.org, in the blog section, and I guess you could search on the BRICS Summit as a PDF, and you can look at that there in the fride.org. And likewise, Modi and the EU is on fride.org, and you can look for Modi and the EU, another PDF. So Gauri, we, we're kind of out of time. I hate that, honestly. And my only reaction is we have to reschedule for another time when we can catch up with you on everything you've been doing. And I really enjoy the idea of video Skype with you, even late at night. You look terrific on video. We have to keep on doing this, okay?
Yes, with pleasure. Thank you, Jay. Thanks for having me online.
Thank you. Gauri Khandekar of Fride, which is a think tank in Europe, and she's in the Brussels office, head of the Asia program, and can tell us so much about what's going on here at ThinkTech Talks, midnight in Europe. Thanks so much, and namaloha, actually, Gauri.
Namaloha.